I need to provide some brief context so this story makes sense. My 3 closest friends and I had just graduated from our university in Oregon, and we decided to take a celebratory road trip down the Pacific Coast Highway before starting our adult lives in different cities. The plan was simple: drive from Portland to San Diego over the course of 2 weeks, stopping at various coastal towns along the way. The group consisted of myself, Ellie, who owned the SUV we were driving, Marcus, our designated navigator and trip planner, and Jace, who knew someone in almost every city we planned to visit. We'd been friends since freshman year and thought this would be the perfect way to cap off our college experience. The first few days of our journey were nothing short of perfect. We drove through lush forests, stopped at scenic overlooks, and spent our evenings at beachside campgrounds laughing around bonfires. Everything changed on day 4, when we reached a small coastal town in Northern California. We decided to stop for lunch at a local diner. The place was nearly empty except for one man sitting alone in a corner booth. He was probably in his mid-30s, wore a faded baseball cap, and had this intense stare that made me uncomfortable. I didn't think much of it at the time. After lunch, we continued our drive south. About 20 miles down the road, Marcus spotted a hitchhiker with his thumb out. As we got closer, I realized it was the same man from the diner. Ellie slowed down, but something felt off. I suggested we shouldn't stop, and thankfully, everyone agreed. We drove past him, and I watched through the side mirror as his figure grew smaller in the distance. That evening, we checked into a motel in a slightly larger town. The 4 of us were sharing one room with 2 queen beds to save money. We spent the night exploring the town, had dinner at a local restaurant, and returned to our room exhausted around midnight. The next morning, while loading our bags into the SUV, Jace mentioned that he thought he saw someone watching us from across the parking lot. When I looked, there was no one there. We brushed it off and continued our journey. A few hours later, we stopped at a scenic viewpoint overlooking the ocean. As we were taking photos, Marcus nudged me and pointed to a car pulling into the parking area, a beat-up sedan with tinted windows. He whispered that he thought he'd seen the same car a few times that day, always a few vehicles behind us. Again, we tried not to read too much into it. That night, we stayed with Jace's cousin who lived in a small house near Santa Cruz. Her place was in a remote area surrounded by redwoods. After dinner, Jace's cousin asked if anyone else had arrived with us. When we said no, she mentioned hearing a car pull up shortly after we arrived, but no one ever came to the door. This was starting to feel deliberate. Marcus suggested checking social media to see if we'd been inadvertently sharing our location. Sure enough, Ellie had been posting real-time updates of our trip, complete with location tags. She immediately changed her privacy settings and deleted the recent posts. The following day, we stopped for gas about halfway to our next destination. While I was inside paying, Ellie ran in looking panicked. She said the man from the diner was at the neighboring pump staring at our car. By the time we went outside, he was gone, but his car, the same beat-up sedan, was still there, engine running. We decided to take a different route than planned, hoping to lose whoever was following us. For a few hours, it seemed to work. We arrived at our next accommodation, a rental cabin near Big Sur, feeling somewhat relieved. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. On my way back to bed, I glanced out the window and froze. The man from the diner was standing at the edge of the property, partially hidden by trees, looking directly at the cabin. I quietly woke everyone up, and we decided to leave immediately. As we hurriedly packed our things, Marcus noticed the tires on Ellie's SUV had been slashed. There was no cell service in the area, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. We locked all the doors and windows, grabbed anything that could be used as a weapon, and huddled in the back bedroom. Dawn was just breaking when we heard glass shatter from the kitchen. Jace had the presence of mind to call out that we'd already called the police, even though we hadn't been able to. The breaking sound stopped, but we could hear footsteps moving around the cabin. Marcus found a back window that wasn't locked and quietly slid it open. One by one, we climbed out and sprinted toward the main road. After running for what felt like forever, we flagged down a passing truck. The driver, an older man heading to work, immediately sensed our distress and drove us to the nearest police station. The police took our statements but seemed skeptical of our story. They sent officers to the cabin, only to find it empty with no sign of forced entry except for the broken window we'd reported. The only evidence of our story was the slashed tires on Ellie's SUV. We cut our road trip short after that. The police never found the man, despite our descriptions and the partial license plate number Marcus had managed to remember. We filed a report, but without concrete evidence of a crime beyond vandalism, there wasn't much they could do. It's been 6 months since our trip, and sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I see a figure standing outside my window. I've since learned that Ellie's account was hacked shortly before our trip. Someone had access to all our plans, our route, our accommodations. I still can't shake the feeling that he's out there, waiting for another opportunity. My name is Marcus. What I'm about to share happened 6 years ago, but the memory remains as sharp as broken glass in my mind. I was 27 at the time, working as an ER nurse at Methodist Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. After 3 years of grueling night shifts and emotional burnout, I desperately needed a break. When my colleague Dina suggested we take a weekend trip to New Orleans with her roommate Elena, I jumped at the opportunity. Both women were fellow nurses, and we'd bonded over the shared trauma that comes with emergency medicine. We left early on a Friday morning in Elena's reliable Honda CR-V. The plan was simple: drive straight through, spend 2 nights exploring the French Quarter, and head back Sunday afternoon. The first few hours were perfect. Windows down, music playing, and the promise of beignets and jazz ahead of us. Around midday, we hit heavy construction on Interstate 10 near the Louisiana border. Traffic slowed to a crawl, and after 30 minutes of inching forward, Elena spotted a highway sign indicating a detour route. Without much discussion, we took the exit, grateful to be moving again. The detour led us onto a 2-lane country road cutting through dense pine forest. It was scenic at first, but after about 40 minutes with no sign of returning to the interstate, I pulled up my phone's GPS. That's when I noticed we had no signal. Elena checked her phone too. Nothing. Dina remained optimistic, insisting the detour would eventually reconnect with Interstate 10. Another 20 minutes passed before we spotted a gas station, a weathered building with 2 ancient pumps standing like sentinels in front of a small convenience store. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s, but we needed directions and possibly fuel. Elena pulled up to the pumps while I went inside. The store was dimly lit and smelled of stale coffee. Behind the counter stood an older man with leathery skin and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When I asked about the quickest way back to the interstate, he stared at me for an uncomfortable moment before responding that we should continue straight for another 15 miles, then turn right at the water tower. Something about his demeanor made me uneasy, but I thanked him and purchased some snacks. As I was leaving, he called out, asking if we were heading to New Orleans. I hesitated, then nodded. He smiled, not a friendly gesture, but more like someone acknowledging a private joke. Back at the car, I found Dina chatting with a man who had pulled up in a pickup truck while Elena was finishing refueling. Dina introduced him as Ronnie, a local who had offered to lead us back to the interstate since the directions could be tricky. Elena seemed relieved, but something about the situation felt wrong to me. I pulled Elena aside and expressed my concerns. The gas station attendant's odd behavior and the convenient appearance of this helpful stranger triggered my intuition. The same intuition that had saved patients in the ER when vital signs looked normal, but something was clearly wrong. Elena hesitated but agreed we should decline his offer. When she politely told Ronnie we'd be fine with the directions I'd received, his friendly expression hardened momentarily before he recovered and wished us safe travels. As we drove away, I noticed him speaking into a cell phone while watching us intently. We followed the gas station attendant's directions for about 10 minutes before I spotted a truck similar to Ronnie's in my side mirror. It was too far back to be certain, but it appeared to be maintaining a consistent distance. I mentioned it to Elena, trying to sound casual, but my pulse was racing. When we reached the water tower, Elena took the right turn as instructed. The road narrowed, winding deeper into increasingly isolated countryside. The truck behind us turned as well, now gaining ground. Dina spotted another vehicle ahead, parked partially off the road near a bridge crossing a small creek. A man was standing beside it, waving as if in distress. "Don't stop," I said firmly, the pieces suddenly connecting in my mind. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter, but maintained speed as we approached. The man stepped further into the road, waving more frantically. As we got closer, I saw another figure crouched near the edge of the bridge. Elena swerved around the man, accelerating hard. In the rearview mirror, I watched him sprint back to his vehicle. The truck that had been following us was now just seconds behind, closing fast. That's when Dina made a life-saving observation. She pointed to Elena's hospital ID badge hanging from the rearview mirror and reminded us of the recent local news story about criminals specifically avoiding targeting healthcare workers due to a gang leader's dying mother being saved by rural nurses. "Flash your badges," she urged. Elena and I quickly pulled our hospital IDs from our bags and held them up as the truck behind nearly touched our bumper. For several tense seconds, nothing changed. Then suddenly, the truck slowed and made a U-turn, speeding back in the opposite direction. 20 minutes later, we found the interstate. We drove in silence, processing what had happened. That evening in our New Orleans hotel room, we saw a breaking news alert on the television. A family of tourists had been robbed and assaulted on a remote road near the Texas-Louisiana border that same day. Their description of the location matched our detour exactly. 3 days later, we reported everything to the state police. The investigator confirmed our suspicions. We had narrowly escaped a coordinated trap set by local criminals who specifically targeted out-of-state vehicles. Our status as healthcare workers had inadvertently saved us from becoming victims of a predatory scheme that had been operating in the area for months. To this day, I can't see a roadside detour sign without feeling a chill run through my entire body. I never thought my first cross-country drive would turn into the worst nightmare of my life. The summer after college graduation, I decided to relocate from Boston to Seattle for a job opportunity. I packed everything I owned into my compact sedan and set off on what should have been an adventure. The trouble began somewhere in rural Montana. The roads stretched endlessly through golden plains, mountains looming in the distance. I hadn't seen another car in at least 30 minutes when my engine started making an alarming rattling sound. I ignored it initially, hoping it would pass. But the noise only grew louder until white smoke began billowing from under the hood. I pulled over, heart sinking. Cell service was non-existent. Opening the hood released a cloud of steam, and though I knew little about cars, even I could tell this wasn't something I could fix myself. The temperature was climbing toward 90 degrees, and I had limited water. The situation was rapidly becoming serious. After about an hour of anxious waiting, I spotted a blue SUV approaching. Relief flooded through me as it slowed and pulled over. A woman stepped out, mid-40s with short auburn hair and a friendly smile. She introduced herself as Lynn and offered to take a look at my car. She explained she'd worked in her father's auto shop for years and might be able to help. Lynn examined the engine carefully, making concerned noises. She eventually stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans, and told me my radiator had cracked. There was no way to fix it roadside. I'd need a tow and replacement parts. What happened next seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. Lynn offered to drive me to the nearest town about 40 miles away. She said her husband was heading that direction anyway in their second vehicle and could tow my car to a garage. All I needed to do was gather my essential belongings. I was so grateful for her help that I quickly packed a bag with my laptop, camera, and important documents. Lynn seemed genuinely concerned about my situation. She asked about my journey, my destination, and even offered me a bottle of water from a cooler in her vehicle. Before we departed, she suggested I transfer some of my packed belongings to her SUV in case her husband couldn't secure my car properly for towing. It made perfect sense, so I moved my suitcases and valuable electronics. As we drove, Lynn received a call from her husband and put it on speaker. A male voice explained he was running late but would get to my car soon. Lynn reassured me everything would be fine. I believed her completely. After driving for about 20 minutes, Lynn pulled into a small roadside diner and mentioned she needed to use the restroom. She asked if I wanted anything from inside, and I requested a snack. As she walked away, I noticed she left her phone in the cup holder. It buzzed with a message notification. I wouldn't normally look at someone else's phone, but something made me glance over. The message preview read, "Got everything from the car. No sign of highway patrol." My blood ran cold. Before I could process what I was reading, Lynn returned. Her demeanor had subtly changed. She seemed more businesslike, less warm. She handed me a bottle of water but no snack, claiming the diner's kitchen was closed. We pulled back onto the highway, but something felt wrong. I realized we were heading south, not west toward the town she'd mentioned. When I pointed this out, Lynn's explanation was vague. She mentioned a detour due to road construction. I pretended to accept this, but quiet panic was setting in. I casually mentioned feeling tired and leaned my head against the window, secretly checking for passing road signs. We were definitely going in the wrong direction. I discreetly checked my phone again. Still no service. My mind raced through scenarios. Was she planning to rob me? Whatever her plan, I needed to act before we reached her destination. Gathering my courage, I faked a sudden bout of car sickness. I begged her to pull over, making retching sounds. Lynn seemed annoyed but eventually pulled onto the shoulder near a small roadside rest area with a few picnic tables. As soon as the car stopped, I grabbed my bag and bolted. Lynn shouted after me, her friendly facade completely gone. I ran toward a small hiking trail that led into dense woods, hoping to lose her among the trees. Behind me, I heard a car door slam and the sound of another vehicle approaching. I spent 3 terrifying hours hiding in those woods before a family on a hiking trip found me. They drove me to the nearest police station, where I reported everything. The officers seemed unsurprised. They explained that a sophisticated team had been targeting solo travelers in the region for months. They used a woman as the friendly face to gain trust, while partners followed in separate vehicles to clean out abandoned cars. The investigation revealed at least 17 victims across 4 states. Lynn and her 2 accomplices would strip cars of valuables, then use victims' identities to commit further crimes. I still completed my move to Seattle eventually, but I flew instead.